I put it on my table as if it is your physical body. And I should say, for those listening that kind of are scratching their head and going, okay, you know, I had my own hesitancy in the beginning, just like I think every rational human being would. And I think that's healthy because really the most powerful thing we have is direct experience. So if you want to know if something really works, if you want to know if something really exists, the most powerful thing you can have is have a direct experience of it that surpasses any idea of what you think. And sometimes we just have to get out of, again, our conditioning of what we think is real and come into the possibility that this is a multidimensional world. You are multidimensional. And so we can work if we attune ourselves, if we perceive correctly, we can perceive multidimensionally.
So, welcome, welcome. Today, I'm very happy to be here with a woman who is known for her inspirational style in healing and her soul-centered lens. So she looks deep. And she is a doctor of spiritual science, master of biofield healer, and spiritual psychologist. And she has already facilitated thousands of clients, I think more than 2,000 or more, in finding new ways to clear trauma, blockages, and what I found very interesting, the misunderstanding of one's own life story. So welcome, very welcome to this talk, dear Diane Hudock. Dr.
Yes.
Diane Hudock.
Oh, thank you, Beate. I so appreciate your beautiful introduction, and it's such an honor to really be here with you. So I can't wait to unravel whatever we want to talk about here today.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So yeah, Diane, before we dive into your different modalities, and we work together, you worked with me as well once now, so I got a glimpse of it. I just wanted to ask you, because our people listening are always curious, how did it start? So you haven't been born like a doctor. So what was in your childhood? How did that all unfold?
Great starting question. I grew up in a family where my father was a lawyer, and there was no such thing as magic, angels, the supernatural, these phenomenon that really we find as in our work are part of the normalcy of our existence. So he was very cognitive, if you will, in his ways. My mother was a teacher; she's still alive, and we grew up in a very traditional house, and were churchgoers, and everything was just kind of very traditional. And I would say, blessed. I had the grace, if you will, to have these experiences very early on. Not that I understood them, but I had them nonetheless. And the first experience I had was when I was probably around 6 or 7. And I was in the back seat of my mother's car, and I think we were coming from a grocery store or something like that. I don't quite remember. And you didn't wear seatbelts back then, and I was just kind of rummaging around as I did as a 7-year-old in the back seat of my mom's car, and the car door threw open, and I found myself going around a corner, as my mom was driving with my head about 2 centimeters from the asphalt. And I remember thinking, I'm going to die in a split second. I'm going to fall out of this car. There's no way that I can stay in the car when half of my torso is literally about to hit the pavement at about, I don't know, 40 or so miles an hour. And I remember these hands touched well, pushed me to be exact, threw me back into the car, and the car door slammed. And I remember it was so, for lack of a better word, aggressive that I hit my head on the other side of the car window, and it got my mom's attention, and she said, "What was that?" And I said, "Oh, nothing, Mom." And we just kind of went about our day. And I kept it to myself, but I always remember that being a very sort of important moment in the timeline of my life, and these moments where the super came down to my natural. And then I remember when I was around 14 or so, my father used to hold a lot of his anger inside. And back then, people didn't go to therapy. He didn't really have the strategies to handle his stress, his curriculum, his issues. And I remember he was watching TV and he was angry, but not dealing with it in a way that was, of course, healthy, processing it. And you could just feel it in the atmosphere of the room. And I said, "Dad, if you don't let go of that anger, you're going to get sick right there." And I pointed to his stomach because I saw from the kitchen into the living room where he was sitting, I saw this black sort of trail of soot, if you will, that extended out of his body about, oh, I don't know, 6 or 7 feet. And it was very prominent. I could see it. And I started realizing that I was perhaps seeing things that other people didn't. Again, I didn't really know what to make of it. It's really astonishing to me as I tell this story that I had the gumption in the moment to even speak that to my dad and not really know what it was I was talking about. I was simply responding to what I saw. But now I know in hindsight, of course, many years later, that that was his biofield. And that was what was going on essentially in his subconscious that was creating matter. And my dad died in 2000 of stomach cancer that they couldn't take out because it was the size of a Nerf football, and it created its own blood vessels and whatnot that they couldn't do anything.
So
So I said,
you have seen it how many years before
I
he died?
saw that. Yeah, I saw that. He died when I was 28, and I saw that at 14. 14, maybe 15. I think I was 14. I remember,
Wow.
I believe I was 14.
Wow.
And because that was a time when things started kind of really turning up for me. And again, didn't really understand or have the spiritual maturity to know what to do with it. But as life happens, providence comes into play, and you're organically led to where you need to go to really hone your gifts. And I do say, our life is a combination, I believe, of both gifts and skills. So I believe God has given me these gifts to see, to perceive a certain way in service to humanity. But also, of course, I've been to school and I've learned in these particular skills. So I don't believe that skills and gifts are quite the same. And I think that's a really important distinction, because some people will come to me and say, "Diane, can you teach me what you do?" And to a degree, I can say, yes, I can teach you the skills of how to perceive the biofield, the sort of topography of the biofield, the information that I have found in the biofield. But I don't know if I can awaken your gift or not, because some people, well, I should say everyone, I believe, is anointed for a very specific mission or assignment or gift. And luckily, thankfully, humbly, I've been able to find, after many years of discovery, of course, it wasn't a smooth ride, my gift. And then you combine that with your skill set and off you go.
Yeah. And you have learned a lot. So you have learned yoga and kinesiology and other modalities. And I think this is pretty much important to really get to know my own gifts. So
Yeah.
to watch how they unfold, to see what I can do with it. And so with what did you start? So when you saw this with your father and you were 14 years old, so when did you start to learn intensively or intentionally these
Yeah.
things?
I think my first teacher was this man named Mitek Workus. I don't think he's around anymore. Um, I believe he passed on, if I'm correct. Can't really find much information about him, but he was an energy healer. And I went to him because I was having issues at the time. I was very sick as a teenager, and I grew up in a very difficult home, a lot of mental, uh, emotional abuse, physical abuse as well. And um, so certain members of my family have or had mental illness. And that was sort of my curriculum that I had to combat every day. And it really shaped my world. It really shaped me and it prepared me. It prepared this vessel for what was to come many years later. And so I think the first thing I remember is going to when I was sick, this man Mitek Workus, who was an energy healer, because at 19 they told me I had a year to live with an autoimmune disease, and so I got really astute about learning about disease processes. I would go to Georgetown Library. I grew up outside of DC, and I would go to Georgetown University Hospital Library like I was a pre-med student, and I would scour the books on all things disease. But I kept being led to these random books that were on energy, which I found curiously available in a university library. And one thing led to another, and I went to this man, and he was my first experience at feeling sensorially the effect of energy by another person with intention on an individual. And I remember he was doing work. He was working on my throat because at the time there was some issues with my thyroid. And I remember standing upright and my eyes were closed, but I thought I was standing absolutely sideways like this because he was pulling things out of my biofield. He was pulling things out of, I think it was the left side of my body. And so when I opened my eyes, I fell down because I lost my sense of place because I thought I was literally sideways. No, he was actually pulling distortions out of my field. And that was my first experience. And then I just started being led from one place to another. I would go to a party when I lived in New York City. And I literally remember walking into this party and I met a Buddhist monk. And he said, hey. And I said, hey. And he goes, how's it going? And we just started talking. And within 5 minutes, he goes, what are you doing tomorrow? And we go up to Woodstock and I'm meditating in the mountains with these Buddhist monks. And they're teaching me about energy and how to control the mind, our thoughts, to redirect them, to heal, to awaken this amazing internal technology that has been given to us. And it is an amazing internal technology, which I think is, again, really important to mention that we have all the resources of heaven inside of us. We have all the equipment, technology, consciousness available to us to self-heal. I think it's just we've been conditioned on this planet, which is a fallen world, really. It's a world of deception if you look at it. Just drive down the road and look at the billboards and what's being propagated upon you is that you're not enough. So
Yeah.
once we can unplug from that conditioning and start really going inside and see that we have everything available to us. And yes, often we need to go to teachers, people that have been doing this that can mirror back to you the truth so that you can get going.
So you could heal, you were able to heal your autoimmune system thing.
Yeah, this
And
is
how,
this is a
how did,
yeah,
yeah.
this is a great story, I think. What happened was at the time, after going to this first guy, I was going to be a doctor, and I decided I wanted to be an actress at the time. And I applied to drama school in London, and I made a complete about face. I changed everything. And all my courses were chemistry, biology, all of it. And I said, you know what, I can't do this. And I got this hit from spirit that said, no, we're putting you in a different direction. I applied to drama school in London, went to drama school, fell in love for the first time. I was away from my home for a year and a half, and I was so happy doing what I was doing. And I went to see the top lupus specialist in London because of social medicine. You could, of course. And he looks at my chart and he's studying it for a minute or two, and it's really tense in the room. And then he looks up at me and he says, "You don't have lupus." And I said, um, "That must be a mistake. You have to look again." And he said, "No, you don't have lupus. Have a nice life. Go enjoy yourself." And what was so fascinating when I was mentioning conditioning, I was so conditioned by what the man in the white coat had said to me 6 months ago. It's like, get ready, right? Because you might be taking off soon. And that was so embedded in my consciousness that I had lost track of my own power to heal to a certain degree. And yet I was in an environment where I was so joyous. I was doing what I loved. I wasn't thinking about this condition that was placed upon me or told that I had, or maybe I had it. I certainly didn't feel well. And my levels and my blood tests certainly showed some really disastrous, situations. But I shape-shifted it when I went to London, and I really fell in love with myself because I allowed myself to experience joy for really the first time. And I was in an environment that was so loving and supportive and new and fresh. It was like a kid in a sandbox discovering a new imaginary land. And so I truly believe from that parlance, I did heal myself because of my positioning. Now we can position ourselves in our mind in our rigidity, and we can make ourselves sick. We can position ourselves in environments externally that are really toxic. And the question is, like I say in that program that you did, everything that we don't like in life, somewhere we created it, promoted it, or allowed it. And then the question is, well, then why are you allowing yourself to remain? Why are you tolerating something that is not of the loving? When your essence is loving, you are beloved, you are to be loved. So why don't you consider moving into a space that is a place where you get to be loved? So, yeah, that was a really amazing sort of shape-shifting moment in my life, because that really changed my trajectory tremendously at what's possible.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful story about the environment, the energy, and the vibration, because I think this is what is now needed in our time to raise the vibration so that we really can be healed or can heal ourselves, and that we really let go of all these things you can't do it or you are not good enough. And this is what keeps us really in a closet. And
Yes.
most of the people can't go out because they don't believe they can't. So
Right. Right.
um, I'm so excited about your work in the biofield. Can you a little bit explain more? Because there is as well in Germany so much talking about quantum healing, and from my perspective, you can't heal quantum. They are heal. It's only the information which is in between the field. Is it this what you are going to do with biofield healing?
Yeah, great question. Well, I see about 95% of my clients all over the world, 5 days a week via Zoom. And I take their field, or I call it their template, which you could consider, and depending on what school of thought you work with, it could be considered your light body. It could be considered the Akash. It could be considered, again, an aspect of the biofield, which is a very particular structure. It's a toroid. But I, with intention, take your template, which is like an X-ray or a brass rubbing. You say all kind of the same thing. And I put it on your table as if, I put it on my table as if it is your physical body. And I should say for those listening that kind of are scratching their head and going, okay, you know, I had my own hesitancy in the beginning, just like I think every rational human being would. And I think that's healthy because really the most powerful thing we have is direct experience. So if you want to know if something really works, if you want to know if something really exists, the most powerful thing you can have is have a direct experience of it that surpasses any idea of what you think. And sometimes we just have to get out of, again, our conditioning of what we think is real and come into the possibility that this is a multidimensional world. You are multidimensional. And so we can work if we attune ourselves, if we perceive correctly, we can perceive multidimensionally. So when I work with people over the world, I am working in the quantum. And the quantum, by definition, is simply not relegated, meaning it's not limited by time or space. Well, then if it's not limited by time or space, and that's not my definition, that's these quantum scientists. They know it's not relegated by time or space. They know that all matter comes from energy. So we come from energy. The question is, well, let's find out more about where that energy source is and the nature of that energy, the intelligence of that energy. Consciousness, by definition, is always expanding. So even on your worst day, because your consciousness, you're really in a state of expansion, even though you feel a tremendous amount of inertia and you feel a tremendous amount of resistance and constriction and contraction or sadness or whatever may be at play. You're always expanding. And so in the biofield, when I'm working with clients, I put their template on the table. It has its own landscape, topography, information. And after doing this, like you said, I've kind of lost count at this point. I've probably done over 4,000 sessions easily. And I have my own data. But in the very beginning of doing this, even to get certified way back when, we had to do some sessions at a distance. And I remember my very first session where I was working with a man and he didn't want to get on Zoom. He didn't want to get on the phone. He just wanted me to send him notes. And I had with intention, I scheduled his date, his time, and that day I put his field on my table. I put his template on my table, which sounds absolutely preposterous, mind you. And believe me, when I say, when I was in my living room doing this session, I thought, what am I doing? This is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I want to get certified. I am curious enough, willing enough to put my beliefs, my limiting beliefs, my ignorance aside to see and find out, just as an experiment, what happens. If nothing happens, great. If something happens, even better. And so I put his field on the table, and I found, as I do through our protocols, the edge of the field. And I started combing the field, getting information. The first thing I experienced was my body was in a sort of tremble. It was shaking. And it was actually very disturbing. And it felt like I was having a seizure. Not me personally, but as I'm in this person's field, because it's like that, I am picking up this sense, intuiting that this man, as a boy, had a seizure. So I wrote down seizure. Then, as I went along, it happened again. And I wrote down, this was a long time ago, I think it was like 14. I wrote down seizure because the biofield is timelined, it's stratified. So I'm finding out where I am in the timeline of this person's life. And it's all recorded, just like the Akash. And the Akash, for those listening, it just means field. So the biofield could be, in my opinion, considered the Akasha or an aspect of the Akasha because it's a field of information and it's there. And so I wrote this information down. The room started reeking, not even smelling, burning in my nose of bourbon. So I wrote down, oh, this man is medicating himself with bourbon. I got a lot of information around his mother, and there were issues with the mom. So long and short of it is, I wrote down all of this very specific information. And sure enough, this information was right on. And he had had a seizure at 6. He had had a seizure at 14. He had issues with his mother. We were working out all these distortions in his subconscious, which is in the biofield. And so these things exist. We can't rationally make sense of it. And I kind of just want to say, so since we can't rationally make sense of it, just don't worry about it. Just know that this is a world that is beyond our understanding. You know, it's like these are the mysteries of God, and they're mysteries for a reason. And perhaps we're not meant to understand all of it. Perhaps if we understood it, we might dullify it, or we might try to control it, or we might try to block it. You know, humans do crazy things when it comes to the divine presence and energy and creation.
Yeah, when you just talked about the timelines, so-called, within the biofield, you know, I just got a picture of a tree. And when we cut trees, you see as well the rings of the age.
That's right. That's right.
As well what has happened and because of the structure. And this just came into my mind's eye. So this is an analogy.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up. It's a great point because in the biofield, it's actually flipped. So we know how old a tree is by its rings, as you mentioned. And as the rings go out, we can determine how old that tree is. In the biofield, it's flipped. So when I'm working with someone, let's say I go out about 7 feet, I find the edge of their field is this little double membrane layer. And then I'm slowly working inward towards the table. And as I'm working inward towards the table, as you get closer to the quote unquote body or the template, that's real time. So let's say someone's 40, out at the edge of the field is birth or the gestation period, and then halfway would be 20, and then close to the table would be real time 40. And then there's all these other phenomenons that show up in the field that give us information, whether it be what the fork does in its own language, if it goes up, it goes down, if there's a wall, if it pushes me back, in the ancestral river. It's called, you know, one of my mentors, Eileen McCusick, she in biofield tuning calls it the ancestral river. And for a reason, because it is just that. It's a phenomenon in the field that is like a river. So as a practitioner, when you get into this phenomenon, this area, it feels like it's actually, there's no denying it. It's a current like a river, and it literally pulls you, it ushers you. And after doing thousands of these, I've actually found a lot of information in the ancestral river that I was never taught, but it just came again through getting on the bike and riding it over and over and over again. And the information came in one by one by one. And now there's this whole landscape of the ancestral river. So we know the importance of the conditioning, the epigenetic phenomenon, the karmas, the miasms, whatever you want to call it, that can get imprinted as some scars, impressions as souls, depending on who our parents are and their parents' parents and what they went through and what was not resolved in the consciousness. See, we're clearing the subconscious in the biofield. And the subconscious doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. It doesn't know that trauma, if it's not resolved, it doesn't know that trauma unresolved that happened, say, 20 years ago, didn't happen yesterday, because it doesn't understand time. So it really behooves us to not only win in our own fantasy, but to really guard our mind, to really practice what we call in spiritual science consciousness focusing, to focus on what's working in your life, to get going with making your mind a paradise, not a battlefield. And that's one part of a big pie of how we can heal. Forgiveness is a huge component in healing, as you know, in our sessions, and I do this with every client since the beginning of time until the end of time. And when I do my last biofield on this planet, that unconditional forgiveness is the salve of salves to heal those unhealables, to dissolve the unnecessary dilemmas, resentments, judgments, againstness, first and foremost of the self, so that we can see ourselves as we were wonderfully and fearfully made, if you want to go that direction. We are divinely made. And so it really is important that we get going with seeing ourselves the way that we are, which is seeing ourselves with the eyes of our wholeness and thus our divinity.
Yeah. For me, it was very impressive when you worked on my biofield and what you just mentioned, the ancestral line, the flow, because I witnessed your whole body moved like this flow, which were just there. And so, do you experience these things then? Do you see them? Is it just your body who is giving you, because you are in this field at the moment, every information?
Well, I do feel it in my body because as you know, everything I'm doing, I see myself as a servant of God, to just be completely transparent. And so at the end of the day, I'm aware of this gift. I'm aware of my skills, but ultimately, I must get myself out of the way so that the higher information or the highest information, the purest information, that which comes from our Creator or the ministering angels that are sent our way, however you want to say it, can come in and deposit that information in me so I can give it to you. And when I call in the light, I'm doing just that. I'm calling in, I'm invoking that presence of that which knows way beyond anything Diane could ever know or understand or compute or come up with. I'm not that good. It's that I have learned how to trust my gift. And that took time. And when I allow myself to trust the information, the divine presence that is present, miracles happen because I am positioning myself for the miracle to take place. You really have to position yourself. Miracles don't just fall on anyone. We have to create the atmosphere for the angelic to come in. And so, to answer your question, yes, I do feel it in my body because anytime I'm in someone's field, as an empath, I'm getting information. Sometimes, I'll take pictures of these rashes that show up on my body if I'm working, say, someone's liver meridian. And then I'll pull up my shirt, to show my rib cage, and there will be a rash all around the liver. And people go, oh my God. But, it goes away. It's not that I'm holding on to anything. That's why I call in the light, because I know the light will take it. I'm not working with, you know, some random energies. I'm not working with some fairies and,
Yeah,
incarnate beings, none of that. This is working with the divine presence. This is a
the
straight
source.
shot down. And so when we position ourselves in that way, again, miracles happen, and we are windows, not doors, as practitioners, or at least that's something certainly I try to teach my students, is how to be a window and not a door, because it's not uncommon that many healers that come to me in my mentorship programs or whatnot, they'll say, how do I not hold on to this energy? And I said, well, you're holding on to this energy probably because you're judging, or because you have a condition in your consciousness somewhere, a misinterpretation of self that you think it's yours to digest. It's not your job to hold on to another person's curriculum. And it's not your job, of course, to judge. And so I get this a lot with people that say, oh, I went to this party and this energy of this person was so blah, and I feel like I took it home with me. Well, that may be so that this person's energy was not so great, but who created the opening for it to come into you? You did. So we're all responsible creators.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
who did judge it? I
that's right.
think that we are, when we are in judgment, that is the time when we take over exactly the energy which we want to avoid.
That's right.
Yeah,
Because loving and judgment can't coexist. You're either in your loving or your judgment.
yeah,
So, at the end of the day, which is it? If you just go through your day and you just, as a commitment, as an intention to yourself, practice today, I'm going to at least try. I'm going to commit 10% more. I'm going to commit to doing the best I can, walking in my loving presence. No matter what takes place, no matter what anyone says or does, I'm going to hold in my loving action. That could change your life. It could change your week. It could change your relationships. It could change everything because you're changing how you relate to the world and yourself.
yeah. So it's really the intention. It's as well the intention to, for example, to book a session with you or another healer. So then you have an intention, and
Yeah.
then if you believe, then the miracles can happen, and you are guiding and you are helping, moving the energy or releasing the energy or healing something which has not the frequency, which is important for healing. And so I saw that you as well work with frequencies, to get rid of these energies, or how would you explain it?
Yeah, so these are just vehicles to help usher energy forward back into the body, to give your brain feedback so that you can hear what's going on. You can physically, sensorially hear what a distortion sounds like. You can go, as I may have done in our session, I'm not sure, but often when I get a distortion, I'll say to someone, do you hear that? What does that sound like to you? And they'll say, oh, it sounds like resistance, or it sounds like fear. I mean, fear is like, there are there are all kinds of signature tones for different conditions. And so when I'm working with frequency, these are just vehicles to, again, usher energy to break up distortion. Why? Because these frequencies are coherent in nature. They're not incoherent. They're about syntropy, not about dissonance. They're not about noise and creating more noise in the field. We all know what noise feels like. It doesn't feel good to the body, to the senses. We want our life to be one of harmony, one of music, one of flow. And there is a frequency to that. As you know, there are frequencies that can really harm people. They do that in these, undercover, governmental, whatever you want to call it, but psych op missions. But we're not dealing with those frequencies. What we're dealing with is pure, coherent frequencies, like a 528. 528 could be considered by many the energy frequency of the heart. And interestingly enough, bees buzz at the frequency of 528. So you see this mirrored, replicated, displayed, demonstrated in nature. All these coherent frequencies you can find in nature, in the fractal technology or the fractal unfoldment in nature. You can see it pretty much everywhere. So these frequencies are just that. They help to break up what is seeking to be dissolved so that you can usher, kind of like combing or raking leaves in the fall and putting it into a bag. We're raking or combing resource, biophotons and biophonons. Biophotons is the scientific term for this nature of the light in the ether, this plasma. And biophonons is the nature of sound. And we're made up of sound and light, just like biblically, right? The word, and then there came light. And so when we have trauma in our lives, and trauma can look like all different kinds of things, depending on people's perceptual lens, that information, that distortion shows up in the biofield. We, for lack of a better word, we kind of emit or we throw up light and sound. And so it's lost resource. You could say it's very shamanic. These are sort of fragments of the self that are floating around the iCloud storage of the biofield, and they're seeking to be reunified back into the body. And so that's what we're doing. That's what I'm doing, is I'm finding these areas of distortion, hearing the dissonant tone, getting the very specific information, breaking it up so that the resource is made available. And then we scoop it up, if you will, we pick it up, if you will, and put it where it wants to go, which might be the heart. It might be your solar plexus, the sense of self. It might be your root. The root chakra is all about often our familial beginnings, our family roots, our foundations. When we had a really shaky start here on planet Earth, we might have a distorted Manipura. I'm sorry, not Manipura, Muladhara. Our Mul means root. Manipura is the solar plexus. So interestingly enough, the solar plexus, I talk about this a lot and I find it really fascinating. When people have issues with self-esteem, sense of self, lack of self-confidence, it's not uncommon that I'll find issues in the biofield around the solar plexus. And I often will say, if you look up the Manipura in Sanskrit, right, translated, it really means, one translation means the city of jewels. You're a city of jewels. You're a diamond. You're a gem. You're not trash. You're not rubbish. You're not to be thrown out. You're to be, here we are, beloved. You're a diamond. So let's polish that diamond so you can allow your radiance to shine. You're not allowing your radiance to shine. And why? Well, we find that reasoning in the biofield. And so it's all there. And we can just put that energy again through the forks as a vehicle to usher forth that lost resource back into the body temple or template or light body, wherever it needs to go. And the fascinating thing about this work is the body, your multidimensionality is so intelligent that when we clear these distortions, these misunderstandings of self in real time, the body mechanisms, the field, the consciousness, it will start correcting itself. And then, as you know, as you experience, the tone changes in the fork because it's an indicator that there is reunification. There's an indicator that we've ushered this energy back into a greater state of wholeness, and thus you're more embodied. A lot of people are actually disembodied, meaning they're not fully embodying their whole self here on earth. It's like they have one foot in and one foot out because of their trauma. And that can be corrected.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have an open heart, but if you don't know who you are and you don't have a strong sense of self, you can think of the solar plexus as like the Bunsen burner that fires up the rocket of the heart, right? And so we're really, there's such an opportunity here to get going with honoring yourself, being confident in who God made you, and going forward confidently and in your authentic nature, really being unapologetic about what it is that you do that brings you joy and sharing it with the world because we need you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really amazing what you just mentioned when you worked with me and together, how the tone changed in the fork. It was, yeah, it's an experience which is right there, firsthand.
Yeah.
It's right there.
You
Yeah,
know,
Mhm.
it's worth mentioning to Beate, that to your point, it is all right there. And truthfully, I don't even need to use forks. I can just use my hands, but often I don't because of that reason, because people that are skeptical, I mean, most people that come to me aren't really skeptical. They've taken a journey where they're open enough and they know they've tried everything else. Let me try this. And they get to have this experience, which reinforces their gut instincts that there's more than what appears to be. But to your point, it is all right here. And the reason I do use forks is so the brain can compute the change and they can go, oh, it used to sound like this. I just cleared my consciousness and now it sounds like this. They wouldn't necessarily hear anything, of course, if I just used my hands to move energy. Not bad, but the forks serve as that feedback mechanism so they can hear the difference in what has shifted within them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wonderful. So it's such a wonderful work you do, and you do as well. You help people as well, not only with this work you do when we are one-on-one, but you did as well programs and where one can study with you, and you have as well an online course for 7 days reset, which I found very interesting. So going through this for 7 days or 7 weeks or 7 months, whatever people needs to know. Would you like to just give us a glimpse about these 7 days?
Yeah, of course. So I was really led to create an online program that was not only effective, but also affordable to just about everyone. there's a lot of courses out there that are long and expensive. And Spirit said to me, take some of your best key teachings that you offer in your 3-month mentorship and make it a 7-day process for people. And again, you could do each level, say 3 days, or you could do each level once a week and it would be a 7-week process, or you could do it in 7 days. It really depends on where the person is at and how much they want to get going and accelerate in their life. But this course is the Alchemy of Overflow, because I'm very interested in people getting going with their life, seeing themselves as they truly are, and taking dominion of their consciousness. So I have 7 very key teachings. One, like we talked about, what are you creating, promoting, or allowing in your life? So they can start looking at that. They can listen to meditations with frequency that will start reshaping their subconsciousness so that they start seeing and perceiving themselves through the clearest lens, which is really the soul-centered lens. And I provide, as you know, these processes of clearing, these exercises. So they get meditations, they get processes, they get teachings, and there are 7 key teachings in service to them really learning how to partner with the divine and get out of their head so that they can start really mastering their ability to receive for greater things, greater goodness, and heal whatever is needing to get healed now. Why wait? So yeah.
Yeah. You know, I love a sentence which I learned from you so much. It's always in my mind since then. I forgive myself for judging myself, and then whatever comes. So
Yeah.
I think, as you mentioned before previously, the forgiveness for yourself is one of the main keys. It's not about forgiving other people. It's the first thing, forgive yourself. And I think your program as well, this work with you and as well the 7 days, can help everybody just to tune into this kind of energy, forgiving myself. So this is wonderful. This is wonderful gift you give to the world.
Oh, thank you. It's my joy, and that's my whole purpose. My purpose is to awaken people to their magnificence.
Yeah.
That's and these teachings will get them there. If they
Yeah.
work with it, it will change their life like it's changed hundreds of others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we will put down the website and everything where people can find you, and if somebody wants to work closer to you, so they will find you. And for the very for the very end, before we end, I always have 2 questions which I want to ask you. The one is, what do you wish for the world? And the other one is, what do you want or wish for yourself?
Ooh, great questions. What I wish for the world is collective awakening to the divine loving that you are, that we get reestablished in our knowing who we are and whose we are, that when we start to perceive rightly, then we start to perceive everyone else rightly. And we stop trying to control, we stop judging, we stop one-upping, we stop with all those things that create and more separation. The lower energies of the me, myself, and I mantra are dying. And I truly believe we are in a very, very potent and exciting time of ascension. And if people go, yeah, I've heard that, come on. I can just say, well, look at what's going on the planet with the systems that are kind of breaking down. The old paradigm is breaking down. It's no longer working. But you can also see the negative aspects of the world that are still trying to hold on for dear life to control humanity. And so the opportunity here, again, not to reiterate too much, but to take dominion of your consciousness, to get going with knowing your God self, and to see yourself through the eyes of soul, and to see everyone through the eyes of soul. If we all get going with that, the acceleration on this planet, who knows what could take place, but it could be a tremendous time of healing collectively and individually. And then what I wish for myself?
Yeah.
I wish that my wish is that I live my life completing my mission that God has given for me. That's really the most important thing to me, that I don't waste what has been put in me, and that I make God proud, that when I cross over, the committee of angels are clapping and saying, good job, that the book of Diane in heaven that's been earmarked for me was 100% done, not 50% done. So with that, my hope is that I really complete my mission here to the fullest. And so I don't have to come back. And have a repeat.
So we meet somewhere else, because
That's right. That's
then
right.
we see each other on another planet or somewhere else.
Exactly.
So nice.
Well,
Thank you so much, Diane. I appreciate your work. I appreciate you as a human being, as an infinite soul. So I was so proud having you here, and I wish you all the best. Yes.
thank you. And I just want to say before we go, just in service to those that are interested, I wanted to offer a 20% discount. I'll give you a code. It will be in the show notes. It's NEVSA for New Earth Vibration Soul Alignment, NEVSA. And they can put that in and get what they need to get and get going.
Yeah, I appreciate it very much. I will put it into our landing page, and we'll give the information to all. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Again, Diane, thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What an honor.
Thank you for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and tell others about this channel, and please subscribe.